Welcome back to Star Spangled Gamblers. I'm your host, Keen Dog. I'm here. I'm always here with you, Pratik.
Hey,
Listen to that charisma. Um, anyway, this is our Friday podcast, which means we've got an extra special guest with us, and today that man is Brian Darling, who is the head man of Liberty Government Affairs. He is a former senior communications man for Senator Rand Paul, Senator Mel Martinez. He's worked think tanks. I think he's done everything. I don't know, Brian, did I get it right?
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the Senate. I, excuse me, did everything from opening mail to answering phones to counsel to communications director.
Did you? I feel like this is a conversation that everyone who was like a Hill rat has to have at some point. Do you have that one phone call that you answered when you were like 23 years old that you'll just never forget? This like the psycho.
Oh yeah, I've had a couple of them. I had a couple of them. I had one, you always have one person that calls and you get a little angry and maybe you give them a little attitude and they say they want to speak to your boss. So I had a one call like that where I went to my boss. My boss played along, talked to the guy, and then we laughed about it later. But yeah, actually, when I worked for Senator Paul Coverdell back in
Back in the
1993,
day.
yeah, right when he opened his office. So I was one of the first. I was the second person hired. I answered phones, and we had so many phone lines to cover. People were calling in like crazy, and it was just me and one other individual starting out. And
Did
I
your
just
did your
worked.
predecessor leave you any infrastructure? Or did you just have to? I always hear those horror stories of you walking on day one and there aren't even phones.
Well, our predecessor was very unhappy that Coverdell won because it was White Fowler, a Democrat. So
Mm.
they trashed the place. I mean, literally, the place was just garbage all over the place. Tables flipped over and stuff. They didn't do us any favors. So it was pretty bad. And
This is
then,
the game,
we get
yo.
in there and it was just awful. I mean, it really was a really tough experience. I would basically go into work 8 till 5 and just answer phones all day long. That's all I did is answer phones, write down notes, and
I
basically help out.
I used to spend Monday through Thursday with just be me doing data entry, entering phone calls and emails into the constituent database, and then on Friday I'd have to answer 4 days worth of mail before the
Oh,
weekend.
oh,
It's not a glamorous lifestyle in politics, let me
it
say.
was horrible. Yeah.
Well, my key line about all of this is this is the point where I say, well, we're here to talk about the future. We're here to talk about predicting politics, and we're here to talk about making money predicting the future and not lamenting our checkered pasts in this dangerous game. So, Brian, in this format, we like to have a little fun. We like to kind of have a bar argument uh, about some crazy stuff going on. Which of two bad bets would you rather make? And you do trade on Predicted, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. I love predicted.
Do you have a name on the Predicted that traders will see in the message boards?
It's just my name, Brian D. I don't hide it. I'm there, and I'm just trading under my own name. I'm not trying to you know not use my name just in case I do really poorly, so people won't make fun of me.
Well, but okay, but now you've stumped me again. I want to know, like, biggest win, biggest loss.
My biggest victory was, I wish I had bet more money, but I remember when Ron Johnson won his Senate seat back in 2016. Everybody thought he was going to lose. I mean, it, he was not. Absolutely nobody thought he was going to win. And I had friends that actually worked in Wisconsin that thought he was going to lose, but the numbers were so low. I mean, the number on predicted was like 12 cents
Yeah.
per share, so I couldn't pass that up. Even though I thought he wasn't going to win, I thought there was a chance he might win, and then he ended up winning.
Well,
did
groupthink
you?
runs.
Yeah. Oh,
So
I was
you.
going to ask you about Wisconsin. Were you surprised that Trump won Wisconsin in the presidential? I mean, I would say that one came as a shock to me more than anything else in that cycle.
Well, I had friends that worked in the campaign in Wisconsin, and it was a shock to them. I mean, they really did not think that they were going to win Wisconsin. I don't think the Trump campaign, in their hearts, really thought that they were going to win it. And my guys in Wisconsin were, they were trying to figure out their next steps because they really didn't think that Trump was going
They
to
were
win.
calling you
So
for a job.
one of my friends was, yes, he was calling me for a job, but yeah, they didn't think he was going to win. But
That was
the
that was such
numbers
a
were
weird
so
night.
off. The numbers were just so off. I mean, Wisconsin, the numbers are just really arbitrarily low. And I think that people were just, overreacting to a lot of the poll numbers and just saying that, oh, Ron Johnson has zero chance. But anytime you're a Senate incumbent, you've got a chance. You've got a pretty good chance of winning. So I just thought the numbers were way off. And I thought, if I'm going to lose some money on this, let's do it, because there is a pretty good chance he's going to win.
So I want to talk about that same Senate groupthink on our little barroom game of Would You Rather. There's another Senate race where, well, you know what? I'm going to let you tell me. Down in the state of Alabama, let's go down to Dixie Boys. Jeff Sessions, heavy underdog to Tommy Tuberville on Predicted to win that Republican primary. Would you rather bet on Sessions to beat Tuberville, the old Auburn football coach, or would you rather bet on Doug Jones to beat any Republican that runs against him in the general election for that Alabama Senate seat?
I've been saying since the day that Doug Jones got elected that he's renting the seat. He's got zero chance. I mean, I guess in betting terms, you can never say 0% because he did win the seat and he beat a Republican. Yeah. But I mean, he has no business. He had no business. I mean, he almost lost to a candidate that ran one of the worst campaigns in the history of politics. He still almost lost that race. And so
the child rape platform of Roy Moore.
Yeah, Roy Moore. And I mean, Roy Moore ran really, really bad campaign. And from beginning to end, he ran it as bad as he could, and he still came pretty close to winning. So you look at that, and you look at Alabama, you look at it, it's going to be a presidential year. No matter what happens to Trump nationally, he's not going to lose Alabama. And so I don't think there's any chance Doug Jones wins. So I would take any Republican over Doug Jones, because I think the one thing that really bothers me when you see these analysis of who's going to take over the Senate and what the numbers are going to be, they never really talk about Alabama, because you have to add in another pickup for Democrats to get Democrats to take over the Senate. I mean, you would have to actually add one in, because Doug Jones is not going to win. So they need to pick up more seats than they think.
He does have that, like, the friendly Democrat at the necktie dinner party in Alabama thing going for him. Like, he's not one of them. He's just like us, or something like that.
He's trying. It's just not working, though. And that's, whenever there was a vote on a Supreme Court nomination or a judge or something that's going to be close, they always said, oh, Doug Jones might vote with Republicans this time. And you wonder if he sits in his office saying, I'm kind of liberal guy. Do I just want to embrace being a liberal and just enjoy being in the seat for a couple of years and vote the way I want to? Or do I want to make believe I'm a moderate, even though there's not a really great chance I'm going to?
Well, there's nothing more dangerous than an emancipated senator. So that will be interesting to watch coming down the road. You haven't touched, I was really trying to actually Pratik kind of prep me for this. I was really trying to needle you, though, about this Alabama primary between Sessions and Tuberville.
Yeah. So, I'm somebody who worked in the Senate, and, I've spent a little time around Jeff Sessions. And obviously when he was Attorney General, he had a rough go of it, and the president's been just beating him up. And I think people are overemphasizing the fact that Trump has been talking him down, because Alabama has had him on the ballot, every 6 years for the last, 3 terms. And he was the Attorney General of the state in '94. So they voted for him. If you're an older Alabama Republican, you voted for this guy maybe 4 times, and in primaries, maybe 5 or 6 times. I mean, you voted for this guy a number of times. So I think he's got a much better chance than the polls indicate. It's going to be it's not on election day. It's one of these things where people are going to have to be really motivated to go vote in this. And I think that he's going to have some built-in support that we don't see, because the machine in Alabama, they like him. He's been there. He's been helping out the state for years. Some of the stuff you can't see in polling, I think, is going to help him out. So I put some resources of my own saying that he's going to beat Tommy Tuberville. And you never know. There may be Alabama football fans that hate him because he was an Auburn coach too. Maybe that'll knock him down a point or two.
So I want to hit you with a different side, though. Like, what about look, I'm out here in Hollywood in California right now. What about give us something different? Like, we just want something different. Does that factor in?
I don't think in a Republican primary. I think this is all about whether you're a Trump guy, and if Trump likes him, you're going to vote for him. Or if Trump hates him, you're going to vote against him. So I think a lot of your hardcore, MAGA Trump voters are going to just say, we want Tommy Tuberville because Trump doesn't like Jeff Sessions. And then you've got people that have been there a long time that said, I voted for Jeff Sessions a number of times. He was a great senator when he was there. I'm still going to vote for him. I don't think that many people are going to go in and say, "Hey, we need to change. Let's give Tommy Tuberville a chance," because he's more. It's more so for him. He's trying to out MAGA Jeff Sessions, and Jeff Sessions is trying in his own way to put his arms around Trump as much as he can, at least the agenda. But that's not going to work. I think it's going to be a really close race, but I think Sessions has a much better chance than the betting odds give him.
What if? Okay, so pretend that the future looks different. Who would you rather bet on? Sessions to win the general, or Nick Saban as a Democrat to win the general?
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, we know Tuberville is a good enough politician to actually win the primary. He kind of won it before. I mean, obviously in Alabama, you have the runoff situation. So if they didn't have a runoff, he'd already be the nominee and already be getting, measuring the drapes in the Senate because he would have won already. But so I'd say Tuberville. I'd go with Tuberville.
You'd take Tuberville over Saban in an election, but just not. You wouldn't pick that on the football field, though.
No, not in the football field. I wouldn't pick anybody who's a Democrat in Alabama because you have a built-in, you're losing 20 points right off the start.
I don't know, all those national championships. No, I don't know. I'm joking. I think you're right.
So I'm
ahead,
asking out of ignorance of Alabama football, but you mentioned the rivalry being a factor in Tuberville versus Sessions. Do you, in fact, think that's a 1 point thing, or could it actually be a significant factor?
I don't think it'll be a big factor. I think there are people that care about that stuff. I mean, I'm from Boston, and if a Republican, say if, I mean, I don't know if there's a good example of somebody.
No, there is a good example of this, but keep going.
Okay. I mean, somebody who's, I guess a classic example for me is if I lived in New Jersey, I would have had a problem with Chris Christie being my governor because he didn't even root for any of the local sports teams. He was a Dallas Cowboys fan. Something like that would bother me about the candidate. It would strike me as somebody having, not real loyalty to his own state. And so if you had somebody in Massachusetts who was a Yankee fan, I probably would never vote for him because I hate
Martha Coakley did this. Martha Coakley recognized what's his face as a Yankee and not a Red Sox. He said Kurt Schilling, a great New York Yankee.
Yes.
It's like,
that was a mistake.
Idiot.
She also refused to campaign at Fenway Park during the hockey game they had because it was too cold. And all the sports fans are like, how can we even consider you when you basically denigrate hockey fans who show up in 0-degree weather to go watch a hockey game? So she lost. Yeah, Martha Coakley is a great example of somebody who snatched defeat out of the jaws of victory because she should have won that race. And then, we had a couple of years of Scott Brown before he lost.
I don't think anyone ever mistook Scott Brown for a Kennedy either. PJ, did we satisfy your curiosity, or are we just having too much fun being dicks over here?
No. Should we move on?
Yeah, you want to take the rock on this one?
Okay, well, I want to actually continue on the theme of incumbent senators. Would you rather buy Lindsey Graham to lose in South Carolina or Elizabeth Warren to be VP? The markets are giving them roughly similar odds in the low teens.
Well, I've already gone for Elizabeth Warren. I'm already committed to Elizabeth Warren because, when you look at, if you were Joe Biden, who would you pick? I try and put myself in the shoes because you never really know. I mean, when Sarah Palin was picked by John McCain, she came out of the blue. She wasn't on anybody's radar. So I think the best thing you can do when you're looking at a VP pick is, what would I do? And, would I pick Kamala Harris? No, because what is she, she obviously brings a lot to the table and helps, but your VP pick can, in the long term, hurt you more than can help you. And so what would you be looking for in a VP candidate? And he's already.
Wait, I've literally never heard anyone say that in my life.
What's that?
I've never heard someone, your VP can hurt you more than you can help you.
Yeah, because when has a VP candidate ever been really that important and decisive? I think you look back to Sarah Palin gave, McCain a little bump in the beginning, and then she didn't do so good. She didn't wear over time. But if you look at somebody like Elizabeth Warren, I think that if I'm Joe Biden, I have much more confidence that she can get on the stage, hold her own, and actually maybe be an attack dog against Trump more so than somebody like Kamala Harris or some of the other people who were put out there. So I would go Elizabeth Warren. I don't think Lindsey Graham's going to lose in South Carolina. I mean, even if you have a wave election, I just don't see it happening. I mean, there may be other states where you have a chance for big, surprise Democratic pickups, but I just don't think South Carolina is going to be one of those states.
Can I say something very controversial?
Sure.
I think if you want to know what Republicans really think, it's like whatever Lindsey Graham is talking about. Like, I feel like inside the machine, someone get that camera with Brian laughing. Like, Republicans secretly love Lindsey Graham and will not let him go down under any circumstances.
I'm not a big fan of Lindsey Graham. I'm not a fan of his at all. I feel like he goes with the wind a little bit too much. He's one day he's the biggest critic of President Trump, and the next day he's golfing with them. So, I kind of like, I'm obviously biased. I work for Rand Paul, so I kind of like the guys
that the opposite
you can
guy.
Count on. Yeah, you can count on. He's going to be what he's going to be. You're not really going to be surprised at what stance he takes. You may be surprised at how he does it, but you're not going to be surprised when he filibusters a bill or says something a little bit out there, because that's what he believes.
I love the crookedness of politics, because all the contradictions is, if you understand the contradictions, you understand why things happened, and maybe have a good guess as to what's going to happen next. So a crooked spine loser, that's my guy. Cheer for him every day.
So we have a couple of items in the mailbag on Warren that maybe we can use to press you. I think one argument that some of our readers are making for shorting Warren has to do with the fact that Massachusetts has a Republican governor. So if you pick Warren, you're now risking a special election where the seat is not guaranteed. Actually, the reader here is bringing up Martha Coakley as being one of the precedents. So especially in a situation where the Senate may be up for grabs, do you think that Biden would be willing to roll the dice on that?
Yes, because I think that when you look at the Massachusetts being, I'm from Massachusetts, and we've had a lot of Republican governors, but not many Republican senators. So you have, Scott Brown, and you have to go way back into the 70s to get a very moderate Republican, Ed Brooke, who represented the state. But, you had Senator Ted Kennedy represented the state for a long period of time, John Kerry. The whole House delegation is loaded with Democrats, not one Republican. They haven't had a Republican in there since the 80s, and that was a couple of members had a cup of coffee there. So I think the states, I wouldn't worry about it. If I was Joe Biden, I would not worry about Massachusetts flipping to the Republicans. Probably more so that maybe be put out there by some people that want to see somebody else win that race. But I just don't think it's a danger at all.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Democratic Party and you can't hold Massachusetts, you should probably just commit suicide and disband immediately.
Yes.
Not to detour too much, but on Massachusetts, do you have a view on the Senate primary there with Kennedy?
Say that one more time.
The Ed Markey versus whoever the new Kennedy is.
Primary.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, this seems like the big push in the Senate to do what Jim DeMint kind of popularized on the Republican side, is progressives trying to take out incumbents and to make make the party a little bit more to their liking. I mean, it seems like it's more of Ed Markey's definitely not somebody who I would consider a moderate, but no. I think that many in Massachusetts look at him as he's been there too long. He doesn't do all that much, and they want a Kennedy. They want to get the Kennedy legacy up and running back again. I don't think we don't have any really? Kennedys. Well, I think Massachusetts people love, when you look back and, John F. Kennedy was a senator from Massachusetts. You have Robert F. Kennedy, you have Ted Kennedy, and then you have all the kids, Rhode Island Senator Kennedy, House Member Kennedy, and you've had, a bunch of different Kennedys kind of bubble up into the politics. And, people in Massachusetts, they do like that. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Democrats have had such a hammerlock in the state forever. I think a lot of it is a romanticism with the Kennedys and what they did for.
But are you sympathetic? Like, I look at that market and I'm holding Ed Markey. I was like, if I can buy Ed Markey, like, he's a veteran, he's got a lot of friends, like, he's not an idiot. you know, if I can buy Ed Markey in like the, you know, low to mid 30s against Kennedy, where, you know, your average prediction trader is just popping a bone because they see his name.
Yeah.
But you're telling me you're pretty confident that Joe Kennedy can retake the so-called Kennedy seat?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, look at what happened, and you know, had a weird situation in Massachusetts where Ariana Presley won that seat and knocked off an incumbent. You're seeing incumbents getting knocked off in the Democratic side much more frequently now, and it maybe this will be the first time we see it happen for a Democrat in a long time. I mean, this is, you know, it's very hard to knock out an incumbent. It's really hard to do it in a primary. And on the Republican side, I mean, you've only seen it happen a handful of times. Unfortunately, I was a victim of one of them. My former boss, Senator Bob Smith, ran up in New Hampshire for re-election and lost to John Sununu. And so I was out of a job in 2002 thanks to that election. But if you look at the history of it, it just doesn't happen that much. I mean, you've had a handful of times where that's happened.
Boy, I sort of want to deviate from our plan here and ask you, Pratika, were we about to ask him about another Senate primary? Is that what's about to happen?
Yeah, go for it.
There's another primary contentious going on in Georgia. Doug Collins, Kelly Loeffler's like maybe dropping out. What the hell's going on?
Well, see, in that race, you know, that maybe, you know, one of those races where you see a very strong challenger to an incumbent. I mean, she's an incumbent because she was appointed to the seat. So it's not like an incumbent who'd been reelected once or, you know, elected one time and is serving their first term. So she's a weak incumbent.
Yeah.
And it doesn't help that, you know, that whole scandal is just really blown up in her face.
Does it help that she's a babe?
It might help her a little bit, but I don't think she's handled the situation well. And if you're a Republican in Georgia, you're going to look at that race and say, you know, this Doug Collins has been basically front and center fighting tooth and nail to get Trump, you know, help Trump out in the fight, to fight the, you know, all of the battles that he's been fighting in the House with Democrats. And Loeffler's just kind of checking the box, you know, doing some stock trades, making some money, but she hasn't distinguished herself at all in the Senate. She's done nothing. You know, the first time she really popped up on the radar screen is when she's getting investigated by the ethics committee, and that's not usually a good thing.
What'd she do? That's my senator?
Right.
Can I have her phone number? So you take Doug Collins to win that?
Yeah, and I was just saying a moment ago, it's really hard to knock off an incumbent. So, you know, but on that one, I would think that she's going to lose. I just would think that the voters of Georgia are going to rally and just say, we want Doug Collins, because, you know, if you are coming into an election year where you want to get Trump reelected and you're a MAGA voter, he's been more MAGA than she is. So I think you would go. And, you know, remember when she was appointed, that was something that was a big bone of contention with the Trump administration, because Trump.
Oh, yeah. Because he wanted Collins, right?
Yeah, he wanted Collins. So, you know, maybe there's a little quiet campaigning going on in the state to knock her out.
Yeah.
I agree that Doug Collins is a talented politician, and it showed during the impeachment hearings. I've been a little reluctant to get in that market. The only reason is, you know, a lot of the progressive hype is around Raphael Warnock, but I haven't heard too much commentary about the fact that Joe Lieberman's son is also running on the Democratic side, and he's actually polling pretty well. And I think there's a tendency to kind of discount just how much of an advantage it is to have a prominent father who can bring Democratic donors and the like. I mean, I think that's part of the reason, actually. Maybe you can talk about Rand Paul, but I think that the markets early on were discounting his ability to win, not recognizing just how much of a national force he could bring into the primary when he first ran. Now, I think a lot of this sort of depends on how much you think Georgia is trending blue and how much of a blowout it might be for Trump. So I'm a little wary because I'm bearish on Trump generally, but I also think Doug Collins is a talented candidate.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really hard to look to the general right now to see what's going to happen, because there's, you know, we went from an election that was going to be a referendum on Trump and the economy, a weird election already. You know, before the coronavirus, we were looking at a campaign where Trump's economy was doing great, but his poll numbers were terrible. And, you couldn't figure out if this was just a repeat of 2016 where he was under polling and people just weren't, his voters weren't getting picked up, or if it was real this time. Now you've got the coronavirus and his response. Is this election just going to be a referendum on what he did, during the coronavirus and responding to it? And, the other huge factor is the fact that Joe Biden's been running an awful campaign. I mean, the guy's, in his basement, he makes so many horrible mistakes, and the Trump campaign is so good at exposing whenever Biden makes a gaffe and making it into the biggest deal and making it in the national news. I mean, they've been really amplifying it, and, Trump's Sleepy Joe thing, it catches on. I mean, we saw in the last cycle how all of the names that he tagged the different candidates in the Republican primary, they stuck, and it really hurt them.
I mean, if I'm I'm in the business of making bad metaphors, and it's almost like the Democrats built an army to win the last election. Joe Biden was the right candidate to succeed where Hillary had failed, and now it's a completely the army is completely wrongly equipped for this war. It's like the U.S. anti-Russian nuclear arsenal goes into Vietnam, and there's no place where that army is more ill-equipped to fight than in a swamp and in a jungle. And it feels like something similar is going on in this election as it shifts towards this COVID election, that the odds actually do shift a little. It does look better for Trump than it did a couple months ago. Joe Biden's the wrong candidate for that election.
Yeah, no, it seems like it. And I'm just shocked that the Democrats have turned out to be the party of just the establishment. I mean, in the last campaign, you had a lot of candidates that just didn't run because they didn't think they could beat Hillary in the primary. And then, you had a pretty close primary. This time around, you had Joe Biden just run a terrible primary campaign. And in the end, I always thought he was going to pull it out and win, but he struggled. I mean, he lost Iowa. He lost New Hampshire. He had no business really winning that. But nobody really stepped up and became the anti-Joe Biden. And
it felt like where it states that it was a retail campaign where you actually got to shake hands with the candidates, like he was getting blown out. And then once it was a national race, here comes General Pétain. Let's just give him the sword. But I did think he got a lot better as it went on. So I'm not ready to say that he's a bum, but he's definitely not perfect.
Well, back in the day, I mean, he was a great politician. I mean, I worked in the Senate, and I used to see him every day in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the guy, he's a likable guy. He's very good interpersonal skills. He's a good speaker.
He's fair.
He was. Yeah, he's really. I mean, I liked him. I mean, as a person, my boss liked him. As a Republican, always get along with him. You can't say that about all that many Democrats. And but I don't think he's the same guy he was back then. I don't think he's the same guy he was when he was vice president. Something's wrong. He's just not. He's not good. Like, he gets on camera and it looks like he's just not all there.
Well, grandfather time, meet Uncle Joe, and I guess we're all headed that way at some point in our lives.
That's
but
true.
It will make for an interesting election. PJ, you had a question, I should say, a would you rather about the Libertarian Party. I guess they are currently using their Ouija board to contact Friedrich Hayek about who their candidate's going to be for this upcoming cycle. Do you want to, I have no idea what's going on. Do you want to needle our friend about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, obviously Amash was the heavy favorite for the nomination until he backed out. Actually, before I ask you the question, did you have any knowledge that he was going to potentially drop out? It came as a surprise to me, but I wonder, being in libertarian circles, if you had any hint of it.
No, I mean, a year ago, I was on MSNBC and did a segment talking about Amash and what he was doing. And I said back then, this guy's running for president. And that was a year ago. And then I was as shocked as everybody. I mean, they had scheduled one of the libertarian debates that evening, and he pulled out in the middle of the afternoon. And we're very close to when libertarians are going to make their decision. And it was very shocking and surprising. I mean, why would he have gone through the effort of changing his party affiliation to Libertarian and become the first Libertarian member of the House of Representatives and set everything up? And basically, he has been campaigning for a year for this moment. I don't know what happened. Maybe he didn't think maybe he thought he had some problems in actually winning the election. I don't know. And I'm sorry, winning the nomination. I don't know what happened. It was a shock to me, and I still have no idea why you did that.
Maybe
Yeah.
John McAfee's crypto cronies were going to put a knife in him.
Well, so now Joe Jorgensen is the front runner, trading over 50%. Would you go long or short on that?
See, once Amash dropped out, it really threw everything in a flux. And I've been reading up a little bit, and the other candidate, Jacob Hornberger, is somebody who also has been doing reasonably well in some of the early, discussions I've had and polling and all that internally. I mean, it's impossible to poll what's going to happen in one of those libertarian events, but I don't know. I mean, Jurgensen is somebody who's was on the ballot years past. I mean, you think about it, the Libertarians really don't. After how well they did in the last cycle, I mean, last cycle, what did they get? 3.5%, 3.27%, which is by far the most they ever got. And they had somebody who's a former governor, two former governors on the ticket. In the past, have had two former members of the House of Representatives. Ron Paul and Bob Barr, and some pretty prominent people that were involved in the party at some level. Now they've got people that we're some people who are reasonably knowledgeable about politics, and I don't know anything about these people. I don't know
either. I'm like, did you have a catchy blog or something, or like an Etsy store that people liked? Because I have no clue who these people are.
I'm buying nose on everyone in that market right now. I think it's wide open for a more prominent candidate to come in. I mean, I guess already we know Judge Jim Gray is going to get in. I think they're going to probably add him to the market. But like, it's wide open for anyone to come in right now, even like some celebrity or a billionaire or someone who's maybe only vaguely libertarian. But I think anyone can walk in right now, win, and get the benefit of a national party infrastructure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because all of a sudden it's a lot easier ballot access than if you just go out and try and get on every ballot as an independent. I mean, you really could just airdrop in and just run. I don't understand why. I'm not a fan of Bill Weld, but he would seem to be a guy that could just jump in and say, look, I was your VP candidate last time. I really want to take this to Trump. Give me a shot. And you would think he would just walk into the nomination.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Now I'm thinking, like, who's out of a job that was cool like 10 years ago?
Well, Lincoln Chafee was running for the Libertarian Party nomination, and then he dropped out, and I assumed he dropped out knowing that he couldn't beat Amash. I'll have to figure out what happened with him, but there are so many of these people who were prominent at one point and are kind of quirky, and they, this might be a way back in. So I don't know. I think
what's JC Watts doing or something? Did I get his name right?
Yeah.
Or like Kanye.
I would think more billionaire, like somebody like Elon Musk. Why wouldn't Elon Musk say, what the hell, I'm going to run for president? Let's see how that goes, because he's obviously upset about a lot of things right now.
Yeah, well, and the most talented leaders in America are CEOs these days. I don't think you could trick yourself into thinking politicians were the talented leaders in this country.
True. Very true.
I did like the idea of John McAfee being on the ballot, but apparently he'll be executed or something if he comes back to the United States.
I tell you, he's an interesting guy, and he's obviously, out there in a lot of the crazy stuff that he does and says. But I watched one of the libertarian debates, and he's he's got libertarian policy down pretty solid. He makes a strong case when he stays on message, when he's not, talking about his personal habits and some of the crazy stuff he does. But, you never know. Like, he could probably jump back in and take over, take that nomination reasonably easily. He'd have a fight. But, I would think that if you're somebody who is a billionaire, somebody who is looking for easy access, this is your opportunity to go in and basically buy the Libertarian Party. I mean, I already said Elon Musk, but it may be somebody like him. Who else? What other billionaires are looking to run that are right-leaning,
This is one of my favorite takes that I've ever heard in the history of Star Spangled Gamblers. I mean, it is you're right. It's like, this is the time, especially with the money giving part of the Republican Party kind of not sure if they're still in the Republican Party.
How about Peter Thiel jumping in? That'd be great. He's libertarian.
He is indeed. Oh,
well, he's
I'm
also
just
become a
tingling.
Trump toady of sorts. But I agree, someone like him.
Well, they're all attention toadies too. So pick your vice here. This is my least favorite thing that I say, which is that we're sort of running out of time here, folks.
Okay.
Do you want to pass the mic around? And I never have anything to say except visit starspangledgamblers.com and check out starspangledgamblers.com/support so that we can keep doing these things. But Brian, I feel like we should have a podcast a week with you. You've got things to say that are way smarter than what I have to say.
Well, have me on again. I'd love to be on again. And I fully expect that after we've had this discussion, I'm going to log right into Predict It and probably throw away a couple $100 on bets that aren't going to come through, but you never know.
Oh, that's one of my favorite activities.
Because now I know a lot more. After talking to you, I'm going to go in and say, I know what's going to happen here and there and there. I wish I could bet field on the Libertarian, who's going to be the nominee, but that option isn't there.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Well, it is nice to just talk our thoughts out loud a little bit. PJ.
Thank you, Brian, for being on. I thought this is great, and we should definitely do it again.
Thanks.
Well, there you have it. If you're still listening to us, we love you. I'm King Dog. This is Star Spangled Gamblers. Brian, Pratik, good night.
Thank you.